Welcome, everyone. My guest today is Lead Analyst Logan Mohtashami to talk about the lowest mortgage rates of the year and Trump's new tactic to undermine Fed Chair Jerome Powell. First, I want to thank our sponsor, Optimal Blue, for making this episode possible. Logan, welcome back to the podcast.
It is wonderful to be here. Today is going to be a shadow Fed boxing technique day.
It is, but first, let's talk about the good news. We are recording this on Wednesday, and we have had mortgage rates drop to the lowest of the year. Where are we at right now?
Yeah, 6.53%, but, taking Mortgage Daily News and coming off of that CPI inflation print, some people didn't like it, some people did like it. We had a whole bit of news with Bissent and Trump and Powell, and it's a very interesting week. It's been a very interesting week with our tracker since mid-June. So it gets a little bit more exciting for, like we've always said, the second half of 2025 is going to be lit, and it's been a fun week so far regarding all the things that matter to housing.
Listen, anything going lower, that's that's significant. That's not just 1 basis point, right?
No. I mean, to me, we are now having a trend with mortgage rates that is a little bit different than the last few years. And that's the constant variable that I try to teach with. If mortgage spreads do what they need to do, then it becomes an easier time to get towards 6%. And that's our thing. We've talked about this for a few years. Housing data gets better when it gets closer to 6%. However, we've had inflation week. We've had a lot of people that say rates have to go up higher because of inflation. They typically anti-central bank people. But in any case, to have this kind of positive move now, right, really kind of shows the labor over inflation debate. But if bond yields go up again, the damage is much limited now. And last week was a really great example. Last week, the 10-year yield got all the way down to 4.18, that key level we've talked about for those that follow us on Instagram stories. But here, bond yields went up and didn't see much of a negative move. But now bond yields just go down to 4.23, 4.24, fresh new lows in mortgage rates. The spreads are working. Goes back to that. Eventually, there's going to be a time where we have the double whammy effect, where you get lower yields and good spreads working together in trying to get to someone back to normal. Because again, if we're back to normal, we're sub 6% mortgage rates. Okay, so we're at a level to where it's acceptable enough to get some growth in home sales and get some things moving. And that's how I've always tried to frame it since the end of 2022. And this is why I always say it's very essential to track models and what happens with housing, with what rate and what level of inventory and all these things. And I just don't think there's a lot of males in America who are trained or versed in tracking housing data weekly fresh, but they do really good doom porn. Give them that. They do doom porn exceptionally well.
Were you surprised, given the inflation numbers, that we are where we are with mortgage rates?
If I'm a labor over inflation guy, no. If I'm not a labor over inflation guy, then you could look at the CPI report in many ways. There are so many different takes on that. Some people said, "Oh, look, there's nothing happening on with tariffs." Some people go, "Wait a second, we just had a core CPI inflation print above 3%. What? Sarah, I mean, I could talk for like 5 hours on this topic, because if you look back to 1910, the baseline average of CPI inflation is like 3.2, 3.4%, around that level. So the question is, do you stay restrictive? If the labor market is breaking, that's on your onus, that's your dual mandate. There's all these different variables are here. So I understand a lot of people's stakes. So people can make a really great case that if the jobs report was fine, there's no rate cuts this year because inflation on the core side is picking up. But the fact that we're here today, because you remember there was a lot of people that said, well, because of the tax cuts, because of tariffs, mortgage rates are going back to 7.5%, 8%. Inflation is going to go rampant, and and kind of none of that has happened. But I would say it comes from people that I would say are not versed with economic cycles. So you should take those people with a little bit of grain of salt. But in this case, if the labor data didn't get weaker, then yeah, we're still in that 435, 470 10-year yield range. Rates would be higher. But the fact that the spreads are doing what, they should do, and to watch people actually kind of visually get to see, wow, yeah, the 10-year yield was like much lower, and rates, so it's a positive that this is happening this week. Again, by the time this report comes out, the PPI inflation will come out, and we'll see how the data works on that front.
Yeah, the spreads are the heroes. Along with new listings, which were up this year, the spreads getting better are the heroes.
Well, the new listings was a positive. Active inventory was a positive, but both things are slowing down. New listings data has really slowed down since May 23rd. Again, most sellers are home buyers. I did not want to see that. And we've talked about this always. I said, I never got what I really wanted, is to have a few weeks between 80 to 100,000, but the spreads are a positive that it's going lower. Active inventory, the growth rate, I loved the story, especially when it was over 30%, but that is also slowing down after that negative week we had, where growth rate is now down to 24%. I'll take whatever victories I can with the inventory data, because now I'm not so worried about mortgage rates getting down to 6%, about anything bad happening with prices in any meaningful way. Now that inventory is back to the near 2019 levels.
Okay, so let's get into the drama at the Fed, the shadow boxing.
Shadow Fed boxing, president. a little homage to Method Man out there. It's interesting. Trump has kind of somewhat changed the tactic a little bit, and Bissett came out this morning and said, I don't really want to do the shadow Fed president anymore. It was like, we're going to have 10 to 11 people basically go out there and maybe be the Fed chairman. So this tactic is like, I understand what Trump and Besson is doing. They saw a bunch of Fed presidents say, we need to do aggressive rate cuts, or we need to do more, and all that stuff. And all of a sudden they got, oh, look at all these talking points now, right? So if you think all these people are going to talk good about rate cuts because they want the Fed chairman job, put a whole bunch of them in there and see
interesting.
Yeah, so see what they want, because you could use that technique. See, if you really wanted to go after Powell, what we did is we talked about the civil war with the Federal Reserve a few months ago. You have to go after Powell with his own people, right? In that context, you can't really go after Powell in the sense about trying to fire him or sue him for what, all this stuff, but you can systematically go after him if his own people are not agreeing with him, right? Because while you have this time before the next Fed meeting, if you have more Fed officials saying, hey man, listen, the labor market isn't looking good. And that's the thing, Besson came out today and said, well, the Fed should cut about 1.5% to 1.75%. because the labor data is getting weaker. Well, that's what we wrote back in June, that Trump should forget this deficit and emergency rate cuts. There's all this crazy stuff that he's saying out there. Forget about that. Keep it very constant. Go after the Fed with a knife that could cut him, right? Dual mandate. The Congress has only told them for inflation, price stability, and the labor market. The interest expenses are not anything they control or do or look at all. They never do. But you can go after him. Well, you kept on talking about this labor market being, here it is. You're wrong. So the change of tactics is clever. Get all these people out there, say, hey, you guys all want to be Fed chairman? Okay, go ahead, talk. So today, a few of the Fed presidents, Goolsbee and Boston, are like, hey, I don't know. I want to leave rates where they are. You're done. You're no longer, you're not in this group. Oh, you're not in this group. You're not running. The Kansas City Fed, I don't want to cut rates at all. Okay, gone. But the Fed officials that are in the group that might get the job, if they keep on saying that, use them against Powell, get the American public and Fed officials. There's the way to go after him before the Jackson Hole meeting and then the Fed Fed meeting in September, that's a more coherent tactic out there than saying, Trump, I want the Fed funds rate at 1%. These are emergency rate cuts. These are things that happen in a recession. Okay, these are things that don't happen in the greatest economy ever, or the wealthy, whatever it is he's saying right now. But this tactic is more core. And again, Bessent lives in the real world, and he just kind of wants 1.5 to 1.75. Why does he say that? It's what we've talked about since the end of 2022. If the Federal Reserve went back to the old pre-Fed model, that's where the Fed funds rate would be if you use 3, 6, 12-month PCE inflation, right? That's where it would be. So Bessent acknowledging that the labor data is not hot, getting the Fed funds rate, all that is a more coherent attack, and now you have other Fed officials coming in. They've got him cornered, right? So when you get someone cornered, you get the job done, right? Make it a joint attack. And that's at least, that was my like that. That's the first thing that came to my mind, that expanding the reach. It's like, why are all these people going to be Fed chairman? Why haven't they called Waller yet? He wants to use them against the Fed publicly, right? Because now it's like, hey, Powell, your own crew is telling me you're wrong, right? Who else do you have left now? Who else is on your side, So it's one of these things that we haven't had to deal with a Fed situation like this in a while. But for Bessent to say, I don't want the shadow Fed president anymore, I was like, oh, they just want people to just do it publicly for him. And in a sense, shadow Fed boxing, right? Just like how Method Man would like it, right? Do that. And then all of a sudden you're putting punching blows in Powell's, ribs out there from his own people, being punched in the ribs by your own people. It doesn't feel good for Powell. He's 72, right? So here we are getting closer to September. And we have a few more big economic reports. We have a few more inflation reports and jobs reports, but it just makes it harder for Powell if his own crew is going against him.
It's significant that, as you said, Bessent said, hey, no more shadow Fed president, because he's the one that came up, that floated that idea back, I think even before the election.
That was October, before Trump won. They had this whole game plan, which means they knew what was going to happen. Right, it wasn't going to be easy to get rates down unless the labor market was breaking, because they were so far from their 2% target. Well, I mean, they weren't really that far away, but what Trump wanted to do can be a little bit more drag. And if you look at that inflation reports, you could see again some good stuffs are kicking in. So it's one of these things where this was a thought out plan. The execution is very difficult, so they changed it up. The fact that Fed presidents last week went after Powell's kind of mindset, we might need 2 rate cuts, we might need more, we've got to be humble, the jobs data, it's the only thing you could do in this situation, because you can't fire him. And even if you did fire him, you still have regional Fed presidents that you have to deal with. So it's a whole process.
Okay, one more topic before we go today, and that's purchase apps. Let's talk about purchase apps.
Purchase application data now that we are officially kind of under 6.64, and when we go from 6.64 down towards 6%, we're not quite in that downward trajectory yet. They've typically done better on the week to week. So the last 2 weeks have been positive, nothing big, 2% week to week 2 weeks ago, 1% week to week. So in this context, we've had double digit 18% year over year growth, 17. But if the weekly data stay positive with the year over year growth data staying positive, that's what you want to see. What we were lacking is that we would get a few positive weeks, few negative weeks, flat weeks. We weren't getting any clear direction. It wasn't anything negative, but wasn't anything positive. But the year over year data was positive. The new listings data was picking up on a year over year basis. But in this context, I think it'll be good to see what purchase application data if rates go down towards 6 and stay there. Because the last 2 times this has happened, the forward-looking data both has gotten better for the existing home sales market, but it's only done that really from 6.64 down to 6.
It's so fascinating. Obviously the refi share grew in this purchase application index, but I mean, how, I mean, it's not like we've dropped so much. You're like, those poor people, if they're refining into this environment, that doesn't sound good.
Well, I mean, you can have some rate and term people already.
Okay.
You can have people that were 7.375 and then they could get a 6.375 out there. So there are more rate and term refinance people in the mix whenever rates go down 25 to 50 basis points. It really depends on when they purchase their house out there. So I mean, it's the first time this year where we have a very positive trend on purchase application day, but I really want to see what it looks like when we head down towards 6, because the last 2 times it's been positive, but it's been positive in a way that not a lot of people saw. Like last year was a really good example. Last year we had 18 weeks where 12 weeks were positive week to week, 5 was negative, 1 was flat. That is a very positive curve. We showed no year over year growth at all. So people discounted it. Then all of a sudden, bam, couple 100,000 more home sales came out of nowhere. Why? Because the weeklies got better, even though the year over year did it. Here, it's kind of been the opposite. The year over year data is looking good. You got all those people putting their homes on the market and waiting for somebody to buy. The weeklies were okay, but we've never really broken under 6.6, but now we are. So if you get those together, if it follows what we've seen in the last few years, we would get better data.
Okay, so we're about to end, but I had to say, I was at the AI Summit yesterday. Lots of people asked where you were. They were like, "Where's Logan?" I was like, "Well, I don't know that AI is Logan's thing, right?" Like, but they thought they would see
AI. Have you seen my AI game out there?
Oh, you have incredible AI
No,
game. That's true.
AI is definitely my stuff. Are you kidding? 100%.
You use AI. I don't know that you could speak to what lenders should be doing with AI.
Fair enough.
But anyway, I met a lot of people who were fans of this podcast. They're listening. And one of them said, you guys talk about if you're watching, and this person said, I never watch it. And she said, but I feel like I'm missing out because I would miss out on some of the things that Logan does. And so right now, if you're watching, you get to see Logan's cat in the background, one of his cats. You have 3 cats, right?
That is Romulus, yes.
That is Romulus, a very handsome
is the
cat.
tuxedo. He's the old man, and he does not like the new the strays I took in. But I'm trying to keep him more and more into the office. But he was a pest today, as some of you probably heard.
No, it's great. So that would be another reason to watch. People do what they want, but the cat video is great. So Logan, thanks for being on. Thanks for explaining things. I'll talk to you again soon.
Pleasure.